Hello friends, good morning everybody. Welcome to our YouTube channel, and if I am audible, just let me know. Hanji, audible. Thank you so much. Right. So we're going to begin our session for today. I hope you had a very great weekend and you are ready and fresh to start the next weekend journey with me, and that is this news which is very important in today's context, that is a global coal demand likely to decline by 2.3% by 2026. It has been said by International Energy Agency. Now, one of the things that has been highlighted in this particular news is related to overall, if we see, the global coal demand is going to reduce, and it is likely to be reduced by 2.3% by 2026. As you can see, it has been mentioned through this usage of the graph as well. Now, there are certain reasons that are attributing that why there would be certain reduction of global coal demand, and those two reasons what I want to tell you is, one of the reason is that is the developed countries, they would be shifting. If I talk about developed countries, they would be shifting from the usage of coal to renewable energy, right? So this is one of the reasons that you have to understand, because countries have a lot of targets under various climate organizations and climate deals. As a result, countries are on the way that they want to achieve the Paris Agreement as well. So moreover, we can say the developed countries would be focusing more on the renewable energy aspect. As a result, their dependency on coal would reduce, right? So this is one of the reasons that overall, if we talk about, global coal demand will going to be decreasing. Second reason has been that there would be certain that the demand that used to come majorly, if I talk about right now, the major demand we can say is coming from India and China. Yes, India में global coal demand बढ़ेगी as compared to the rest of the world, but if we consider the situation of China, there's not going to be that much change. एक तरह से plateau हो चुकी है वहां पे, अगर हम बात कर रहे हैं demand को related. So as a result, these two conditions, that is the plateauing of the demand in China. Second reason is related to that there would be more and more renewable energy that would be focused upon. As a result, in the overall context, if we see, the global coal demand is going to be reducing, and it is going to be reducing by 2.3%. Now, one of the things that I want to tell you over here is in COP28 as well, that the countries have given a draft as well, where the final draft has been that they will try to transition away from fossil fuels, not specifically focusing on phase out but focusing on phase down, but within a time year that has been specified, that is 2050, right? So that is the aspect that we have to understand in one sense. Second thing that you have to understand is also that there shall be decrease in global coal demand, right? So this was one of the important news that you have to understand, and where you can use this, you can use this in your answers when you're writing in context of climate change. Then you can mention this point if there is a certain scenario where you have to elucidate any situation, right? If you have to elucidate any situation or substantiate with examples, then you can substantiate with these particular examples. Okay, now the second news is very interesting. It is related to cultural context, it is related to Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat, right? And it is related to our unity in diversity. Now, one of the thing we have to understand is last year also there was a Sangam that was created from between, or we can say Kashi and Tamil Sangam. Very, very important, right? It happened last year as well, and now in the second year ceremony it has again happened, and here we can say our Prime Minister has also addressed this Kashi and Tamil Sangam. Now, one thing you have to address is that there used to be in ancient times our saints and our scholars, right, our Rishi Munis, that used to travel back and forth between Kashi and this, we can say, अगर हम बात कर रहे हैं Kashi and तमिल संगम की अगर हम बात करते हैं, वो आपस में क्या करते थे, they used to travel. So we have lot of examples of Adi Shankaracharya, we have lot of examples where Ramanuja has also carried this cultural journeys, right? So in order to understand, make people understand the importance of these cultural exchanges, as a result, in order to highlight the various, let's say, the we can say the cultural history that we have, cultural heritage we have, in order to remind the people again that there used to be so much of cultural contact between the north and the south, these sangams are being created, and it is very, very important in order to create the unity between the north and the south, where earlier scholars, you of north were going to south, scholars from south used to go to north and they used to embark on this cultural journey. But somehow we have seen that this contact has been lost over the period of time. But as a result of this present government's efforts, they are trying to revive this cultural history, and as a result they have been carrying this Kashi and Tamil Sangam, and it is very, very important. And over the time period we will see a lot of more Sangams that would be now more and more we can say held upon, and they would be created an awareness among the people that there used to be such cultural exchanges and we need to be more religiously tolerant, right? So these are the certain examples that we get from this Kashi and Tamil Sangam, or certain ideals that we can understand. And one of the ideal that has been advocated our Prime Minister is the Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat, right? So these are the aspects that you need to understand. See, when I'm talking about these news na, ये prelims में भी आ सकती हैं, पर ये ना आपका mains का fodder है, right? So this is your fodder for mains examination. If you will write those examples, I'm telling you again and again, if you want to score well in mains, you have to write examples. Without examples, your answer is something like without masala in your, let's say, egg curry, without masala in your biryani, right? So you need to put in these examples, right, where the examiner also get to know, yes, he knows the real life situations, real life practical examples, and then he is corroborating it with their static part. So that's why telling you that these news are very important and you have to remind yourself that you have to quote the examples. Okay, now moving to the editorial page. Now this is the most important editorial of today, that is the an uphill struggle to grow the Forest Right Act. Now this whole question and the editorial is focusing on the aspect on Forest Right Act. Now let's try to understand this whole article in a detailed manner, right? So it's going to take certain time, but it is going to be very important for your prelims as well as for your mains. Now one of the things you have to understand is I am gonna use 4 time periods in order to make you understand this whole situation. Now first situation is before colonialism. Second one is during colonialism, right, British colonialism. Then after independence, I can say from 1947 to 2006, and this is after 2006. Now I think you must have got the reference over here, because in 2006 a very famous act was passed by the name of Forest Rights Act. Now let's try to understand. Now when we talk about tribal people and the forest dwelling community, that they used to own the area in which they used to reside in a forest for centuries, and they were the ones that were managing the resources, whether it was a timber resource, whether it was a non-timber produce, or whether it was related to agriculture, right? So they had the access to the resources and they enjoyed ownership as well over those areas. Now if we talk about, that was the situation which I have right now just said. This was before the colonialism period, where I can use the word forest dwellers and other forest dwelling communities, because these are the words that have been used in the Forest Rights Act as well, where they used to have the ownership as well, plus access to the resources as well. Now you would be saying, sir, there would be certain rulers who used to hunt as well, right, in these forest areas, but that didn't inhibit the community access and the ownership of the resources to these tribal people or the forest dwellers or the other forest dwelling communities, right? So they had all the resources within their hand and they were the basic owners of the land. Now the problem started during the time of colonialism, and more specifically when there were certain laws that were passed starting from 1878. Now one of the things you have to understand is that we must have heard in our modern history that there were a lot of tribal and peasant revolt, right? Now let's try to focus on tribal revolts. Why those tribal revolts happened? Because the way with which the British changed the relationship of the tribal people with the forest by inculcating and bringing in their new laws, that changed the whole together scenario. As a result, we used to see there were a lot of tribal revolt as well. But the question and the editorial is not about the tribal revolts, but the way in which the rights of the tribal people were limited and they were changed. That is the thing that we have to understand in this editorial. Now when I talk about the time period when the new acts were passed, right? The relationship with the forest or with the tribals was getting changed. And how it was getting changed, let's try to understand. First and the most important thing that you have to understand was the state now had the ownership of the resources. State had the ownership of the resources, first of all. Now, second thing you have to understand is that if we are talking about tribal people, if they are living inside a forest, they would be advocating certain agriculture kind practice, and the important agriculture practice they used to work, let's say, practice over those areas was shifting cultivation. So that was one of the sources of food security that they have. Plus, they were using the timber resources and that were using them for their own benefit as well. Now, what happened was when state announced its ownership, they said specifically the forest would be used for what? That would be used primarily for timber resource only. Now, they wanted to maximize their revenue, and this not only happened in India but in all the areas in which they were occupying the colonies. They were using these forest laws in order to change the relationship and advocating it there for the best benefit. So one of the things that happened was the ownership was not with the tribal people, it was with the state. Second thing, forest was primarily used for timber resource. Third thing, shifting cultivation was banned. This is the important thing that we have to understand. Fourth, earlier tribal people used to be the owners. Now, these areas were with the ownership of the state. What they used to do was, because they wanted timber from the forest as well, as a result, they needed certain labor as well. So what they did was, they leased out the land to the Adivasis and in fact made them their bonded labor. So from the ownership, they were reduced to the status of a bonded labor, and they were at the mercy of whom? They were at the mercy of the state government. So this is the way the things taken a very, we can say, U-turn from before colonialism and during colonialism, where earlier majority of the power was with the tribal people and now they didn't have any major power. Now, coming to the next part. Now, after independence, what happened was, there was this whole urgency by the government of India that they wanted to integrate zamindari, princely state areas, right? So what happened was, try to understand it very, very carefully. Now, what happened was, now there was a scope of development as well. There were various laws passed as well, like Wildlife Protection Act 1972, Forest Conservation Act 1980, plus there were certain integration of zamindars into the union, right? Zamindari areas or zamindari estates. Plus there were certain development of new project as well. What this all did was, still there was no ownership rights that were identified that had been lost during the time of colonialism. First of all, this is a major thing that we have to understand कि अभी तक इनके कोई ownership rights identify नहीं किए गए थे. दूसरी चीज जो बड़ी interesting है इस पूरी situation के अंदर, that if there was a certain forest area that was declared as a national park or a wildlife sanctuary, then the people had to be relocated to another area without identifying their rights. So this was the major challenge that was coming, because what? Because इनको यहाँ पे problems थी, क्योंकि इनको relocate किया जा रहा था, rehabilitate किया जा रहा था, and they were not getting the compensation. So basically it was an encroachment on their land areas. What happened? It was an encroachment on their areas, right? So as a result, the condition of the tribal people were not good. Not only the tribal but also other forest dwelling communities as well, because of the laws that were in place where they did not provide enough compensation, where they were, let's say, tribals were evicted without getting their rights settled. Third thing, they were always at the mercy of the bureaucracy. Now this is the situation that is still right now, that they were always at the mercy of the bureaucracy. Now what happened after Forest Rights Act? First of all, we have to understand three things. There was this concept of community forest resources और ओनरशिप एज वेल. इंडिविजुअल फॉरेस्ट राइट्स भी कह सकते हो आप, इसको कम्युनिटी फॉरेस्ट राइट्स भी कह सकते हो, वेयर कम्युनिटी वाज, लेट्स से, मेड द ओनरशिप ऑफ द फॉरेस्ट एंड द मैनेजमेंट यूज्ड टू गो टू ग्राम सभा. वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. This was the important thing that were identified, where certain communities were made the ownership of the forest so that they could have an access to. Plus there was also the concept of individual forest rights as well. If we talk about individual forest rights, if we consider the situation and try to analyze that how they have been implemented, yes, there were certain good points in the act where they used to say कि अगर कोई रिजर्व्ड एरिया में है, प्रोटेक्टेड एरिया में है, क्लासिफाइड फॉरेस्ट के अंदर है, वाइल्ड लाइफ सेंचुरी के अंदर है, नेशनल पार्क के अंदर है, देयर हैज टू बी आइडेंटिफिकेशन ऑफ कम्युनिटी फॉरेस्ट राइट्स एंड इंडिविजुअल फॉरेस्ट राइट्स. Now coming to individual forest rights, I have always said that the tribals and these forest dwelling communities have always been at the mercy of the bureaucracy. Because of this result, the individual forest rights have been shabbily, if we talk about, the word is shabby, how they have been, let's say, identified, and they have not been given the proper ownership. Second thing we have to understand is, if I talk about community forest rights, that's the ownership of the communities over a particular area, जिन्हें हम village forest भी बोल देते हैं. Still we have seen in certain areas, barring certain areas, that there hasn't been this recognition of community forest rights. This is the important thing that we have to understand. Here still we can say mostly these people, this community has been identified as Labharthi, that is at the mercy of the governments, right? If we talk about 70 to 80%, right? So community forest rights have not been identified, but there have been certain states, those who have inside the national parks and tiger reserves identified the community forest rights, where how the resources have to be managed has been identified by the communities, and the decision has been made with the concurrence of Gram Sabha. I can take an example of Odisha, I can take an example of Maharashtra as well, and I think I can take an example of Chhattisgarh as well, that has been able to implement community forest rights. So the whole scope of the article has been related to bureaucracy, inadequate, we can say, implementation of the laws. The third is the corruption that has been prevalent over these areas, that is in the forest areas, that have basically debarred the community to take the ownership of the rights as well as the individual rights. So we can still say, even after so much years of implementation, the people have not been able to get the adequate rights over the tribe, let's say forest area, in which their rights have been recognized under Forest Rights Act of 2006. Second thing you have to understand is, जब हम बात करते हैं ना किसी national park में, let's say if any forest area is being converted into a national park, then it talks about relocation of the tribal people. Yes, it talks about the tribal relocation of the tribal people, but in that area you have to understand there has to be adequate compensation that has to be provided to these dwelling communities and other forest dwelling communities. And there are these examples of certain states where they have identified community rights within inside the national park, and that's an example of, we can talk about Odisha, Maharashtra and Chhattisgarh. I hope you were able to understand the editorial. If yes, then type yes. Okay, now if you will read this article, everything will be crystal clear, perfectly clear, and it will create an image in your mind. Now, the stormy Red Sea, the complexities of the global events. Now let me take you to एक काम करते हैं, एक ना मैप देखते हैं रेड सी का एक बारी, ताकि आपको एक बेटर आइडिया आएगा, है ना. अच्छा, एक इमेजेस खोल रहा हूं मैं, रेड सी दिखा रहा हूं आपको, है ना. ओके, हाँ जी, एक बार सारे ये देख पा रहे हैं? ठीक है, देखो ये हमारे पास रेड सी है, राइट. अब यहां पे देखो कि रेड सी, इट इज वन ऑफ द वेरी मच स्ट्रेटेजिक पॉइंट्स इफ आई टॉक अबाउट ओवरऑल इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड. अगर हम इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड की बात करते हैं, इट इज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट दैट यू कैन सी दिस रीजन ऑफ रेड सी. yesterday, that day we were talking about the importance of Oman, Gulf of Oman, right, Strait of Hormuz. But now if I talk about this Strait of Bab al Mandeb, this Red Sea, then you have this Suez Canal, right. This is very, very important and very, very important areas from the purpose of international trade as well, and as well as to maintain the importance of peace and security in this region. It is very, very important, not only for these West Asian countries, but also for the East Asian countries, like we have Japan, we have the China. This region is very, very important even in the context of India as well. Now you have to see कि रेड सी से बहुत ज्यादा ऑयल सप्लाई देखने को मिलता है. सऊदी अरेबिया की जो मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट एक प्रोजेक्ट है, नियोम प्रोजेक्ट, it is on this coastal area as well. So a lot of oil shipping is required, and that passes through the importance, that passes through this Red Sea. Second thing you have to understand is that there has been an impact on the peace and security in this Red Sea region because of the prevalent war that is going between Israel and Gaza. So this is also another aspect that we have to understand, right? So this is the points that have been discussed in this article related to Red Sea. So what would be important from our examination point of view कि अभी पीछे एक ऑपरेशन संकल्प की बात हुई थी जो यहाँ पे कैरी आउट किया गया था. Now the second thing you have to understand is related to the map of Red Sea, right? You need to know the countries with which its border is touching, like Sudan, we have Egypt, we have Saudi Arabia, we have Eritrea, right? So these are the countries that you need to know, because in examination what we are witnessing right now, the questions that are coming is basically from an IR point of view, right? So you need to know the map based location as well, right guys? Okay. Now moving to the next part. अच्छा, अब ये आर्टिकल ज्यादा इतना डिटेल में डिस्कस नहीं करेंगे बिकॉज दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट कि डीलिमिटेशन क्यों नहीं हो रही है, डीलिमिटेशन में इतना डिले क्यों है, सेंसस में इतना डिले क्यों हुआ है, राइट? व्हाई इट हैजंट बीन अपडेटेड एज वेल. सो एज अ रिजल्ट व्हाट दे आर हियर टॉकिंग अबाउट इज दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट टू टर्मिनोलॉजीज दैट दे हैव ट्राइड टू यूज. वन टर्मिनोलॉजी इज लिबरल डेमोक्रेसी. First of all, let's try to understand the meaning of liberal democracy. Now, if I tell you before 18th century, this word liberalism and democracy were at loggerheads with each other. आप बोलोगे कैसे? मैं आपको सिंपल सा एग्जांपल देता हूं. If I talk about liberalism, then liberalism means free market economy. If we talk about capitalist mode, right? Competitive market economy. Now, in this competitive market economy, a capitalist can grow, right? And he has the right for private property as well, right? When we talk about socialism and communism, there is a concept of abolition of private property. But when I talk about capitalism, when I talk about liberalism, right? When I talk about liberalism, it talks about capitalism, it talks about let's say presence of private property. Now, one thing you have to understand was in earlier liberal states, only certain people who had required property can only vote, राइट? जिनके पास एक रिक्वायर्ड प्रॉपर्टी होती थी सिर्फ वही वोट कर सकते थे. नाउ दिस इज अगेंस्ट द कंसेप्ट ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी दैट एडवोकेट्स यूनिवर्सल एडल्ट फ्रेंचाइज. सो व्हाट हैपेंड वाज, कम 18th century, talk about liberal state, capitalist and a labor class. Now, as labor class over the period of time get to know about their rights, so they raise their voice. Now, a liberal state now started thinking that we need to understand both the sides. If we will not understand the case of the labor class, then we will not be able to make them work. As a result, both the capitalist and labor class voices were being heard, and as a result, the transition happened of a liberal state to the concept of liberal democracy, where they integrated this free market economy with the concept of universal adult franchise. Now, in this scenario, they are talking in this article about political equality when there is one person, one vote and one value. Somehow what we are witnessing right now in India, that there they are talking about that there has been two type of dilution. One is quantitative dilution and second one is qualitative dilution. आप बोलोगे सर इतने खतरनाक वर्ड क्यों यूज कर रहे हो? See, I am telling you because these are very important. Now, what about quantitative dilution? Where the vote is not equal in a one state to another state. Now, you must be witnessing, if I talk about the state, let me take an example. In a UP, an MP on an average represents how many people? 2.53 million people. Whereas in Tamil Nadu, an MP represents around how many people? 1.84 million people. So, this gap is being witnessed right now. That is 2.53 against 1.84. That is a part of quantitative dilution. I hope you are able to understand. I know you must be understanding the reason as well, because the southern states carried on their population control measures, their TFR gets reduced, and as a result their population has reduced. But if we look at the overall value of the vote, it is now different. Second thing you have to understand is about the concept of qualitative dilution, which talks about when a voter is not able to choose the candidate of his or her choice due to gerrymandering. Very important word that has been used over here, gerrymandering. When the constituency are drawn in such a manner, when they try to, what they try to do, they try to advocate a particular political party, right? इसके ऊपर ज़्यादा debate नहीं करेंगे. I hope you are able to get what I am trying to say. Where the constituencies are drawn in such a manner that they favor a particular section, particular region as compared to the other region. So they are talking here about a Muslim population not getting the adequate representation. That is a part of qualitative dilution, and it is imperative for the governments that need to carry on this delimitation so that we could dilute, or we can say this dilution that has happened, it should be able to correct, and as a result we would be able to achieve one person, one vote, one value, and that will result in what? That will result in political equality. Where? In the liberal democracy. I hope this point is clear to everybody. If yes, type yes. Okay, now नीचे वाला आर्टिकल है unemployment remains a concern post pandemic. I think everybody is aware of this, कि how it has become. So there are two words and terminologies that has been mentioned over here, that is labor force participation rate and unemployment rate. Let me tell you what is the difference between these two terminologies. When I talk about labor force participation rate, first of all we have to understand that what kind of people are there in the economy. सबसे पहले जो काम कर रहे हैं. Second, those who are looking for work but not finding work. तीसरे वो लोग हैं जैसे नायक मूवी में नहीं होता, right? So third kind of people are those who are not looking for work and they are not getting any work, right? वो कुछ ढूंढ ही नहीं रहे हैं. So when I talk about labor force participation rate, it is the 1 plus 2 divided by 1 plus 2 plus 3. But when I talk about unemployment rate, it is 2 divided by 1 plus 2. Make sure that you remember these definitions, because in examination you can get the direct question on this aspect, right? Chaliye. Moving to the next part on selecting election commissioner, I have already told you that Supreme Court, by looking at various law commission recommendations in March 2023, gave a particular ruling that the election commissioner shall be appointed by the Prime Minister on the President on the recommendation of the committee that is composing of PM, Supreme Court judge, and what we have, that is the leader of opposition. But the current government has come up with a new bill where they have replaced CGI, Chief Justice of India, with whom? They have replaced Chief Justice of India with a cabinet minister. So basically it would be 2 people of ruling party and even 1 people of, or let's say 1 opposition party member. That has created a furore in the parliament, that what is kind of this let's say appointment panel that would be favoring a that's उनका ही फेवर होगा, उन्हीं का वीटो होगा, right? So these are the things that have been discussed, right? इसके ऊपर ज्यादा कुछ नहीं करेंगे, पहले भी डिस्कस कर चुके हैं. अच्छा, an overview of the European Union's Artificial Intelligence Act. So guys, what we have to do, one thing is, there are certain points which are very very important and interesting in this EU का जो artificial intelligence का act है, right? Now one of the problems that I would like to highlight, and then I will try to say how they have tried to let's say bring the loopholes that are there in this various artificial intelligence through this Artificial Intelligence Act. First of all, what they have tried to do is, they are trying to say is, देखो, there are lot of AI technologies, and according to different level of technologies, there have been special rules framed according to the effect. If we talk about, किसी का काफी ज्यादा harmful impact हो सकता है और किसी का काफी least impact हो सकता है. So what they have tried to do is, they have tried to prepare a policy accordance with the level of the technology, right? Now the second, the disadvantage or limitation, अगर हम बात करें इस particular act की, क्या है कि यहाँ पे levels कैसे decide किए जा रहे हैं कि कोई least है, harmful है, कोई ज्यादा harmful है, right? So this is a kind of concern. Second thing you have to understand is that they have talked about transparency and accountability. That is a good sign. Second thing is that they have talked about is the independent assessment entity. So that is also a very good point that has been carried on in context of this Artificial Intelligence Act. Plus, there are certain apps in artificial intelligence that have basically some social and ethical concerns, so that have been totally prohibited under the new Artificial Intelligence Act of European Union. So what we can do is, we can take inspiration from this and use it in your answers when we have to talk about that how artificial intelligence in India shall be regulated. I hope you are able to get this point. Okay. ठीक है, अब भूटान एक मैसिव ग्रीन सिटी बना रहा है अलोंग असम बॉर्डर. अभी याद होगा कि मोदी जी ने भी बात करी थी, ग्लेफू से ट्रेन निकलेगी जो इंडिया में आएगी, राइट? नाउ दिस इज द स्मार्ट सिटी प्रोजेक्ट दैट हैज बीन मेड इन द रीजन ऑफ ग्लेफू, राइट? याद कर लेना, ग्लेफू स्मार्ट सिटी प्रोजेक्ट. जब बनेगा तो देख लेंगे, बट आपको पता होना चाहिए ग्लेफू. मैं लिख देता हूं, ग्लेफू, GELEPHU, right? याद कर लेना, स्मार्ट सिटी प्रोजेक्ट. So it is expected to follow environmental standards and sustainability as a goal and will aim to attract quality investment from a specially screened international companies, right? So this is the basic point that you need to understand. Okay, अब ये सारी political news है, यहाँ पे ऐसा कुछ खास नहीं है. यहाँ पे एक बात करी गई है अंडमान रीजन को लेके. If we talk about the state of the territory of Andaman, then there has not been ever single SC category that has been identified, right? ST categories have been identified, but there hasn't been any SC category. They have been put in the status of OBC class, right? So there has been a panel that has been formed to look into this situation, that in order to see whether they have a population of SCs or not in the region of Andaman Islands. Okay guys, this is it for today. I hope you are able to understand today's editorial. So today's editorial was very interesting, very, let's say, आज का न्यूज़पेपर थोड़ा बड़ा था because there were a lot of good things that were discussed in today's newspaper, and I hope we have been able to cover all of these news. Plus एक आखिरी आर्टिकल है, वो हमने उस दिन भी डिस्कस किया था, that is related to, जब मैं बात कर रहा था सिकल सेल एनीमिया को लेके ड्रग बनाए गए हैं, that is using this gene editing technology, CRISPR-Cas9 को लेके है, where they try to let's say molecular seasoning भी कह सकते हैं इसको, that has been done by the usage of this CRISPR technology, and that has been discussed over here because now the USA Drug Administration has also approved it to treat sickle cell disease, rendering it one of the first CRISPR based therapeutics to be approved by two major regulations, that is one by UK and one is this particular aspect, right? So this is the point that we have to understand, and this is it from today guys. I hope you liked the analysis. I hope you were able to understand, and if you were able to like and understand, please do like, share and subscribe. Till then, we will see each other tomorrow same time 9 AM. Take care, enjoy and have a good day. Thank you so much.